Deep in Germany's infamous Black Forest, there is a path that no longer exists. It was removed from all maps decades ago, but nobody seems to know why. All that remains is a faded whisper among locals who still speak of the strange happenings in the woods. Some call it He was a solo traveler from Munich who spent most of his time hiking alone. He had read about the unmarked trail deep in the woods and knew he had to see it for himself. So one morning he set off into the Black Forest, and those who hear the tales are warned never to go there. First, there were carvings in the bark of some of the trees. They looked like eyes peering out at him, and there were spirals and dots, too. He didn't carve them. He wasn't even sure if anyone else was out here. It stood like a giant in the middle of the forest, its gnarled roots exposed on the ground around it. And as he passed by, he saw something shocking. Embedded in the tree's bark were human teeth. They were dirty and yellow, and some were even broken, as if they'd been chewed recently. But each time he thought he found a way through, the trees closed in again, blocking his path. There was a small campfire there, its embers glowing in the darkness. Relief flooded through him as he remembered reading about the fire pit. It was supposed to be somewhere along the trail, and now it was his only hope of finding his way back. He tried to retrace his steps, but everything looked different now. There were footprints in the dirt, ones that looked far too big for a human. Hundreds of pairs of eyes blinked at him from the canopy above. They were glowing yellow and watching him intently. He screamed, scrambling backwards, but the eyes didn't move. They stayed in the trees, blinking slowly, watching. He shuddered and backed away, suddenly feeling very alone and very afraid. The trees were still and the eyes in the canopy were gone. He was safe. He scrambled to his feet and ran, tripping over roots and stones. He didn't dare look back. He didn't want to see those eyes following him. But as he ran, he heard a new sound. It was a deep voice, raspy and cold, and it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Even the carvings on the trees seemed menacing in the dark. Then he noticed the trunk of the oak was oozing a thick red liquid that dripped to the ground like blood. He stepped closer and saw that it wasn't sap. It was coming from the knots of the tree, as if the wood itself was breathing. He ran faster, desperate to escape the forest and its watchful eyes. But no matter how far he went, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was following him. There were no sounds except for the crunch of his boots on the dry leaves. There was no wind, and yet the branches whispered overhead. But then the unthinkable happened. He turned around, and the path that had been there just moments before was gone. The last voice note was a whisper. "It knows I see it." He was exhausted, his clothes torn and his heart pounding in his chest. He collapsed on the side of the road, gasping for breath. In its place, he saw only a wall of tightly packed trees and growing darkness. Then he heard the whisper of wind through the trees and saw the sunlight filtering down through the branches in golden beams. And again, he heard the crunch of his own footsteps. He was alone in a clearing, and there, right in front of him, stood the pines that leaned. But one Bavarian backpacker couldn't resist. He would become the last person to ever enter the forbidden zone. He pressed on, following the faint path deeper and deeper into the trees. Suddenly, he heard the sound of breathing. It was coming from the woods all around him. He froze, unsure of what to do next. Should he run, hide, or stay still and hope whatever was out there would pass by without noticing him? He stood there paralyzed until he realized the breathing was coming from the trees. It wasn't a wild animal, it was the forest itself. The wood was breathing. This is the terrifying story of what happened to him. But when he turned around, he saw that he was in another clearing. How could there be an echo here? How could there be any sound? In the beginning, there was only forest. There were no paths, only animal trails snaked between the pines. Then, sometime in the early 1900s, a route was cut through the trees, a road less traveled. By the 1950s, it was popular with hikers and bikers. For years, it remained an escape for nature lovers. That is, until 1962, when the locals stopped maintaining the path altogether. They simply erased it from maps and sent travelers to other routes. But then in 2008, a man named Lucas decided to find out why. For 3 hours, he followed signs for the Triberg waterfall and enjoyed the scenery. These trees were unlike any he'd seen before. Their gnarled branches twisted skyward and their trunks were unnaturally wide. Many of them leaned precariously over the trail, forming a natural archway over his head. Legends said they moved at night, leaning just a little closer together, trapping the unwary campers inside. But now they were silent. He kept moving forward, deeper and deeper into the woods, until suddenly his voice echoed back at him. As he continued his journey, he noticed more and more strange things. He came across another clearing, and there were more symbols carved into the bark, ones that weren't there the night before. They seemed fresh. Then, just before sunset, he came upon a large oak tree. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the forest grew darker. He ran, stumbling over roots and rocks, desperate to get away from the sound. He calmed himself and started searching for another way out, climbing over fallen logs and pushing aside branches. After what felt like hours, he finally spotted a break in the trees ahead and stumbled out into a clearing. But when he got closer, he saw that something had been here recently. He didn't know how long he wandered around the forest, but eventually his legs gave out and he collapsed under a tree. That's when he saw it. One of the trees swayed closer, the eyes staring directly at him. "Run," it said. "Run while you can. Run for your life." And then it spoke his name. "Lucas, run." He didn't have to be told twice. Finally, he stumbled out of the trees and onto a dirt road. The next thing he knew, the forest was silent. But the next morning, a hiker found his phone in the mud, still recording.